Well, things in the demon world seem to be progressing. Very interesting things are transpiring, wouldn't you say? But stories always have a focal point, don't they? A place that everything else seems to circle around back towards. I think it's about time that we turn our attentions back to the focal point of our story, the center of the chaos, Taleon, and those that surround him. Or perhaps you'd like to call him Avalar at this point. Whatever name you decide, the story moves forward still. It has been nearly 24 hours since Taleon's first day of training in the mastery of his demonic energy came to its conclusion. They have had a night's rest and have now woken up in the morning, feeling refreshed and renewed. Or at least Taleon has, as he wakes up to the sound of what appears to be something of an argument. As he puts on his clothes and exits his room, Taleon sees his mother in somewhat of a disagreement with his teacher, Salus. "Would you stop being a child?" Melody shouted from the other side of a table towards Salus, who was on the opposite side. They looked as if they were having a game of tag, and Salus was trying to keep away. "I said no." "N-O, what part of that do you not understand?" "And what part of I'm checking them do you not understand?" "The part where I already told you I'm fine. Look, my injuries will tend to themselves. I don't need you nursing me." "Stop being so infantile," Melody shouted back. "Checking one's bandages is just normal. It's intelligent. Wounds can get infected if not treated properly. Yes, you're a demon, but even you have said that you're closer to a human being than many others, and don't have many of the healing properties they possess. It means it's also possible that you could get an infection, so I have to check your bandages." "I have been injured on many occasions," Salus replied, "and I've never had an infection. All of my bandagings have always worked, and I've always recovered. And I definitely don't need you pouring any more of that stuff on me. It hurts like hell." "It's disinfectant. It's alcohol to keep your wounds sterile. Whatever it is, I can do without it." "Must you always be this much of a bother? I swear Taleon is more cooperative." "Yeah, easy for you to say. He never gets hurt." "I mean, seriously, he's a freaking dragon. He's next to unbreakable. And he's only a kid. It's only going to get harder to hurt him as he gets older. Me, on the other hand, I am very hurtable. And I'm quite used to it. So, I don't need your assistance." It appeared as if, once again, Melody wanted to give Taleon's teacher some medical aid, to which he was adamantly refusing. On the other side of the room, laughing, was Rico, there in her pretty blue little dress, a big grin on her face, all of her sharp little teeth on display. Taleon's grandmother standing beside her, even she unable to contain her smile at the time. "You know, it's really no use," Vayri said. "She's always been an incredibly stubborn girl. Once she decides she's going to do something, it's best to simply let her do it. Discomfortable or not. She's not exactly easy to turn down," she said, still unable to wipe the smile off her face. "Though it is a bit comforting. Usually I was the one who had to deal with it. It's nice to see the shoe on another foot now, so to speak," she said, with a slight chuckle. Melody growled. "Fine, have it your way," she said as she raised her hand, scrawling a bit in the air, leaving a green trace of light behind her finger. "Emora pestos." "Hey, what are you?" Salus shouted, before A green whirl of light surrounded his body, forming itself into somewhat of a glowing rope, lashing him very tightly, at which point he fell to the ground. His mother rapidly darted over the table, vaulting over it in a single shot, landing on top of Salus and beginning to check his bandages, as he struggled to pull himself free. "Would you stop moving?" she shouted, as she pulled away at the bandages. "There is something wrong with you, woman," Salus said, staring up at her angrily. "Yes, it's you. You're being far too difficult." Fine. Just get it over with," Salus said, gritting his teeth, and looking somewhat embarrassed, as he finally stopped struggling. Afterwards, it took Melody a few minutes to check him over, treating his injuries, and then giving him some fresh bandages. Eventually, she did release the spell binding him. Finally done. Was that really that difficult? She said, sitting on top of him, wiping what appeared to be a few beads of sweat off of her forehead. Yes, it was more difficult than just not doing anything. Not doing anything would have been easy, he said, staring up at her. As he did, he suddenly started becoming flush red for a moment. "What on earth is wrong with you?" Melody said, looking down at him. "You beet red. Are you getting a cold?" she said, reaching down to feel his forehead. "You're warm. I thought you said demons didn't get sick," she said, as Silas had a very interesting expression on his face, somewhere between embarrassment and worry. I don't mean to be rude, but perhaps you could, get off me?" It was only at that point that it seemed that Taleon and everyone else really took notice of the fact that Melody was basically straddling him in the center of the living room. Melody took a few seconds longer to catch on, looking down at Salus laying on the floor, and her on top of him, before the concept of the situation they were in really hit her. At which point she darted to her feet rapidly, getting off of him, brushing herself off. Now she was starting to blush somewhat herself, looking away from Salus. "Now don't you get any funny ideas. I was just changing your bandages." "Me get funny ideas? I don't know if you recall this, but you were the one on top." Melody looked at him quite frustratedly, seeming fairly angry with the statement. "Okay, if you phrase it like that again, I'm going to light you on fire." "Yeah, great. Then you'll just have some more injuries to tie me up and treat." "That sounds like a great idea," Salus said, rolling his eyes, trying to brush himself off, as he stood to his feet as well, a bit more calmly and slowly than Melody had. "Now that that's all done, I suppose you're going to be taking Taleon and Rico out for training again. I hope it's less difficult than it was yesterday. The last time you brought him back, he was so exhausted he could hardly stand." "What did you even do?" We did some demonic energy training, that's all. The kid was wiped out because his energy reserves got used up. Hopefully it won't be necessary today, but only time will tell. We have to get out and start training, see if he can utilize his energy yet. Once he can, we can start actually training on using it rather than just calling it. But I suppose it's up to your son's skill level. His father had very limited control of his demonic energy, for much the same reason Taleon does. He simply has so much of it that it was difficult for him to truly grasp it, to learn the difference between an outward flow and his regular flow. But then again, his mother had immaculate control of her demonic energy. It stands to reason that Taleon might be somewhere in the center. He could sway more in one direction than the other, but that's left to be seen, Salus said, grasping his chin a bit as he thought it over.